colleague Ranieri Cavacetti from the College of Arts and Sciences, especially the chair of the Italian department here, and also without the support of the Italian Cultural Society, its executive director, Francesca Casazza, who's really a force of nature. Last week we had another presentation on the Constitution of Italy, which was terrific, with Marta Cartabia, the former president of the Italian Constitution, and Nicola Lupo. So thank you, Francesca. It's always a pleasure in August. She was nagging me, let's do it, let's set up, let's book the rooms. We did it. Thank you, Francesca, for all you do for us. And now I'll let Francesca introducing our speakers. And again, welcome to American University, the Washington College of Law. If for those of you who are interested to see the history of our school, it's just here behind this wall. There's a beautiful history of the school, all told through panels. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Buongiorno a tutti, welcome, benvenuti at the first event of Sunday event of the Italian Cultural Society, this time in this prestigious venue, thanks to the collaboration with Ranieri Cavacetti, Department of Italian, and the College of Law, thank you all for coming. In our mission of promoting Italian language and culture, we include the promotion of made in Italy products and the accomplishments of Italian companies and startups like we are doing today. So I have the pleasure to introduce you Andrea Braccialarghe. A few words on Andrea. Andrea Braccialarghe is a seasoned engineering and renewable energy expert with over 25 years of international experience. Before joining Zhero, Andrea spent decades as partner and executive director of Building Energy SPA, spearheading its international expansion from an Italian startup to a leading independent developer and power producer. To a leading independent developer and power producer of utility-scale solar, wind, and hydropower plants. He led the company in South Africa as executive vice president of business development. In 2013, he was appointed managing director and moved to the US to expand Building Energy's global development and operations to North America. In 2020, Building Energy US, its solar and wind operating assets and development pipeline, was acquired by Novis Renewable, a joint venture between Eni and FAC Renewables. And Andrea was appointed Vice President of Business Development, leading the onshore wind development business. Earlier in his career, he was the Country Sales and Development Director of the Utility and Power Plants Division of SunPower, where Andrea was responsible for sales and photovoltaic power plants. Deploying several hundreds of megawatts across Italy and pioneer large utility-scale solar power plants in the country. Before he was the project manager at Shell, and where he began his career. Thank you for being here. Long career, so many words.
Sorry, I'm getting old.
Yeah. And so thank you, Andrea, for being here. And to interview and converse with Andrea Braccialarghe, we have Arianna, who's a senior climate change advisor at the Center for Climate Strategies in Washington, D.C. She has extensive experience in designing, managing, and implementing low-carbon and climate-resilient strategies and implementation plans. She has led multi-sector, stakeholder-driven policy action assessments and capacity-building programs in over 10 countries, in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and has supported numerous government agencies and development organizations. She's author of several reports and studies, and she's frequently invited and speaking in lectures and conferences. Mrs. Ugliano is an attorney by training, and prior to joining the Center for Climate Strategies, She works with the Boneghe law firm in Roma as a senior associate. Mrs. Ugliano holds a Juris Doctorate from Luis Guido Carli University in Rome, a Master in International Business Law from King's College, University of London, and a Master of Science in Energy Policy and Climate from Johns Hopkins University. Congratulations and thank you for being here. And
thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, great. So thank you so much, Fernanda, for hosting us, and Francesca for your kind introduction. Okay. Okay. Well, that was a good sign. I'm pretty loud, so if it's too loud, there you go. Okay, so thank you everyone for being here. We know we are not taking for granted your presence here because it's Sunday afternoon, 3 p.m. This beautiful day, so we really appreciate. And we'll do our best to make this conversation interesting, challenging for Andrea, and I hope also fun, right? So we do know that many of you are not experts in the energy sector or climate change. So we'll try to speak plain English during this presentation, and what we really hope that by the end of the day, you will bring home something new. You will learn something, and maybe you can even find your place in this fight against climate change, this transition within the energy sector. So this is really our goal. So before giving the floor to Andrea, I just want to put this conversation into context. So I think everyone knows that climate change is one of the biggest challenges we are all facing. And this is doesn't really matter where we are. We can be here in the United States, we can be in Italy, we can be in Africa, Southeast Asia. We are all seeing the impact, right? We saw the red skies in summer here because of the fire in Canada, the flood in Italy. We see Africa suffering because of crop reductions due to drought. So impacts are everywhere. Economic impacts, social impacts, people are migrating because of climate change is a huge issue. So we all need to do our part in this fight. Pretty quick, unfortunately. There is really no time, especially for our kids. So within that, I mean, one of the main causes, I think this is kind of clear to everyone, is that climate change is caused by greenhouse gas effects, right? Without getting into the science behind, our planet's getting warm. What really produces greenhouse gases are fossil fuels, and we use that for everything: transportation, heating our house, cooling our house, heavy industries, steel, cement, and you name it. So one of the first things we really need to do is to get rid of this brown energy, as we usually call it, and move to clean energy. And here our transition to energy, where Zhero is playing a key role together with many other companies in figuring out which are these clean energy, clean forms of energy. So I think a few of them are clear to everyone: solar, wind, biomass. Others are really, I think, a bit of mystery right now. I don't want to spoil anything. Andrea will tell us a bit more around this, but there are many things that could be done. So one issue is that a lot of money is needed. There is an estimate from the International Energy Agencies that about 4.5 trillion of US dollar every year is needed between now and 2030 in terms of spending just for clean energy. So, and you see the money is huge. At the same time, we need what we call enabling conditions. We need regulations, we need policies. So we do hope that during this conversation, you can learn about this, you can learn the opportunities, you can learn the challenges, and through the experience of Andrea and what Zhero is doing, you can see that there is really an opportunity. We can do it, but just we need to understand how. So with that, Andrea, so what is Zhero? Why Zhero? It's a pretty interesting name. And what's the role of Zhero within this energy transition?
Thank you, Arianna, and good afternoon. And I'm sorry that outside is so sunny. I apologize. First of all, let me thank Francesca for this opportunity and the Italian Cultural Society. Fernanda, thank you for hosting us. Probably this is the closest I've been with a college law school as an engineer. So I'm very thankful for this opportunity. So what about Zhero, or Zhero, how they call it in the US, and why the edge in between? Zhero is an answer to the energy transition. So many years ago, our founder, Marco Alverà, was leading SNAM for probably some of the Italians here, they know SNAM. SNAM is the largest operator of gas in Europe. They own miles and miles of pipeline, and they've been instrumental when the war struck up more than a year ago. Marco was leading that company, and Marco was reshuffling the way the gas was coming into Europe. But his main idea was beyond that, and it was centered into the hydrogen revolution. So the hydrogen is one of the answers to the energy transition. So everybody knows that in our day life, some of the activity that we do is electrified. Okay, so we use electricity, and we have an answer on how to decarbonize that particular part of our life. The answer is solar, it's wind, we have hydropower, but there is a part of our world that will never be electrified. And so for that answer, we need clean molecules. We need green hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives products that can decarbonize hard to abate sector. So Zhero is working in this particular area in which we continue to develop renewable energy. We know how to do it. We know how to do like large-scale solar and wind facility around the globe. But also we are investing a lot in green hydrogen and other kind of products like green ammonia. If you think about how to decarbonize agriculture, green ammonia is the solutions. There are a lot of challenges, of course, one of which is policy, and we will talk later. But that is what front and center is Zhero about.
So just a quick anecdote that actually I forgot to mention you the other day. So Marco wrote a book, right? That's called
The
Zhero.
Hydrogen Revolution.
Yeah. And
Zhero, the Hydrogen Revolution. And Zhero, that is also a novel for kids.
And I was about referring to this one. It's a novel for kids. So we were in Venice, like with my family last summer, and the book is, the context of the book is Venice. So it's about these kids trying to, because they are in Venice, when you see Venice can be seriously impacted by climate change, they try to fight, create a new source of energy, and the book is called Zhero, exactly like the coffee. And it was really a nice connection. So, Andrea, maybe before we go ahead, just because I don't know many people are familiar with hydrogen, I mean, without getting into like the technical part of that, but I think everyone can picture how we use solar, how we use wind, right? The turbines rotate and they produce electricity, but what exactly hydrogen does, the green hydrogen, where it comes from, like very simple way, how and when can be used?
Try to be not an engineer,
No,
because
no.
that was the recommendation of my wife. Not like an engineer. So you stop me if I'm too much technical. So hydrogen is everywhere, and it's and in our life it's combined with oxygen as a water. Okay, that's where hydrogen comes from. The way we do hydrogen today is through gas. So it's a steam reforming, so we use gas like methane, and we extract hydrogen that is called gray hydrogen. You mentioned before, like brown energy. There is also brown hydrogen. There are different colors, but gray hydrogen is the one that right now is responsible for most of the CO2 released in atmosphere. So we use a gas, we take hydrogen, and then with this hydrogen we do other things like ammonia for agriculture, and stuff like that. Where we need a lot of heat, for example, we burn this kind of products. The new way to do hydrogen is through water. The new way is using electrolyzer. The technology is here. It's here. There are different kind of electrolyzer. I don't want to bother you with the different type of, but we know how to do it. And the hydrogen you have to think about in the electrolysis, you have a source of electricity that is green because you use solar and wind to divide the water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then once you have that hydrogen is called green because you have been using green electricity to do that. Once you have the green molecules, then you can do whatever you want. You can transport these molecules, you can combine with nitrogen and do the green ammonia and decarbonize the agriculture. You can heat because you can use it and heat, burning the hydrogen, you have back steam, water. So no pollution, nothing. And above all, you can do synthetic products like synthetic CH4. So instead of releasing carbon dioxide, you take carbon dioxide and you combine, you do synthetic CH4, and then you can have this in a closed loop. So you keep the CO2. So CO2 for us is the enemy, yes, but then we can use it in a closed loop to be our friend. And that is the other way we are thinking the future as a zero. In fact, one of our first investment has been in a company called TESS, 3 Energy Solutions, where Marco is also the CEO of the company. And TESS is investing into a regasification plant in Wilhelmshaven, Germany, in the north of Germany, where most of those products, like green molecules, synthetic CH4, will arrive in Europe, being regasified, goes into the pipelines, and provide clean energy without CO2 emissions. That is the ultimate goal.
Well, I think, one of the beauty is of hydrogen is that you have sectors that, as Andrea was saying, it's really hard to make it work just with solar, wind, hydro. You have aviation, heavy industries. All these, they are not going away, right? We all need to try it, we all need those industries, and this is really a great alternative to fossil fuel. However, it's a new technology, right? So I guess costs are pretty high right now compared to other technologies. As we were saying, we don't really have time to bring these costs down. Give the technology the time to become mature, have costs down, allow investors to invest at scale. So what are I think this is one of the challenges that you may face, but might not be the only one. So I think it would be nice and helpful, I think, for all of us to hear, which challenges you are facing and how you are dealing with those.
So technologies, for an engineer, it's hard to say it's new. It's not new, but it's not mainstream. So there is no scale, and if it's a technology has no scale, the cost is prohibitive. That's why, for example, when I joined renewable energy, I come from oil and gas, first of all, full disclosure. At the beginning of my career, I was working with Shell, I was working in oil and gas, I was doing my stuff. And then in 2007, all of a sudden in Europe, we adopted one of the most ambitious policy to incentivize renewable energy, feed-in tariff. And with the feed-in tariff, the result was to subsidize solar until which solar would have been self-sustainable. So in this way, you accompany a technology to be self-sustainable, competitive, and so on and so forth. So for green hydrogen and all the derivatives, clean molecules, we need to do the same. That's why in the IRA, and we will talk about policy in a moment, in the Inflation Reduction Act, you have all the usual incentives for solar and wind because they still need to be subsidized for a while. But then we have also a specific area in which there is there are incentives for green hydrogen, because this industry need to be subsidized, need to be incentivized to reshuffle the way we generate power, to reshuffle the way we provide energy to all the hard-to-abate sectors. So that is very important. Technology is there. So technology innovation is there. Policy innovation is almost there with some grayscale. But if we orchestrate better the two things, then we can accompany the technology to be what used to be, for example, the internal combustion engine. When the internal combustion engine was moving the baby step more than a century ago, was not affordable for the majority of the people. But then we make it, and for a century it was working very well, until we realized that there were too much CO2 released to the atmosphere. So that's what we have to do right now. So what we did for the previous industry was done, fantastic, great. That's why we achieved a lot. Now we have to do it in a clean way, and we need to help those industry to take off.
Okay, so help the industry. How do we help those industry? I mean, I think we all can think about great investors, as you guys are, take the risk, big investment, complex financial structure, but there is more behind it that needs to be there, like those enabling conditions, regulation, policies. And you mentioned the IRA. I think everyone knows the IRA because we all live here. It's been such a big deal in the United States. But I think the focus, if you can just provide a focus, what IRA meant for you and still means for you at this sector, I think would be really great.
Sure. Thank you for this question.
I know.
No, I'm laughing because I'm still trying to digest the IRA after a year. No, what is IRA? So IRA is I would like to call it the largest investment in renewable energy whatsoever. The largest by far. People said it's $369 billion. There is no cap. Actually, these 369 billion dollars can be $1 trillion, because the way the IRA works is they will stop to subsidize or to give incentives when we achieve a reduction in greenhouse gases emissions compared to what it was a decade ago or a few years ago. So that is the way. So they decided what was the limit in a specific year, and then they said, okay, if we go back to that limit, below that limit of a certain percentage, then the IRA can go out. You can phase out. Until then, they continue to subsidize. So there is no cap. Initially, they said 369 billions. But then how it is working. So first of all, the IRA incentivizes technology. They don't mention specifically solar and wind and all the other technology that has zero emission. So this is another big evolution. So for the first 2 years, I think for all the assets that will go in operation before January 1st, 2025, then they mention solar and wind and blah, blah, blah. But after, only technology that has a neutral impact or a zero carbon emission can go ahead and get an incentive. And this is it's a big new semantic change. In the past, we were talking about that solar and wind. In the future, we will not talk about technology. We will talk about zero emission technology. So this is to avoid conflict between people that support fossil fuels or people that support renewable energy. As long as you can do something with zero emission, you are my friends, you get the incentives. Second of all, these incentives there is a base of incentives that is for this kind of technology, but then there are bonuses. And the way that the Inflation Reduction Act has been written is to have bonuses as long as you invest into energy community. So energy community are a community, and there are plenty in the US. There was a map where we used to have coal mine or plants that have been shut down. So those communities has people that maybe are out from their job, or they need to be back on and working on something. So the way the IRA is working is that if you invest in that community, then you can get a bonus. Second, you have a bonus, you actually a multiple on the incentives if you invest into renewable energy or technology with zero emissions, and you also invest part of the money in apprenticeship, because the government want to have people back at work, but also learn new work in the energy sector. And last but not least, there is also prevailing wage. So you have to pay a good salary. So it's not that you just, it's not a rush to the bottom, like we said, where you hire contractors very cheap. No, you have to hire contractors to build solar and wind and those kind of things that pay prevailing wage to people when they hire for some specific projects. Last but not least, low-income community. So another way to get a bonus on incentives is investing in area in which there is a low-income community that essentially are mapped by the Department of Interior. So all these things make investment also just, because we don't talk about energy transition, we talk about just energy transition. So need to be a justice. Now that we have an opportunity to reshuffle the energy mix, we have to do it in a just way. So investing in area that have been left behind in the past.
This is particular, I mean, it's valuable here in the United States because, as you can see, it can just help the economy to grow, but you can imagine the impact of this concept of just transition in other countries where you have this disparity is huge, where you have people really relying, for example, on mining, on coal. That's the country, what really drives the economy in that country. You need to change that. Maybe before getting on like other countries, because also I think that's something that would be nice for people to learn because it's part of your experience. Just going back to the regulation and the policy and how that help. So from an investor standpoint, still what you explain shows how comprehensive IRA is and how helps the entire economy. But for you as investor, what the IRA really means and where maybe it's still lacking? What is still lacking?
No, for investor, one of the most important things about policy is the time frame, because when you invest in such complex infrastructure, the development time frame is very long, and you don't want to have a change in policy while you are investing millions of dollars to develop those kind of projects, right? It happened in the past. I've been in Europe developing solar and wind, and all of a sudden there was change in government, change in policy with retroactive effect that is killing investment. So that's what you don't want. You want to have an horizon long enough to invest while our job is secure a piece of land, get all the permits, get the rights to be connected to a grid, secure enough takers that can buy molecules or electrons, and so on and so forth. So this can take a few years or a decade, depending where you are. So you don't want that someone change the rule of the game while you are investing millions of dollars in specific projects. So IRA is going into that direction. There is no change in the horizon. There is no risk of repealing of this policy, let's put it this way. Maybe they can change something, but it will stay there for more than a decade. So that is the first good thing. The second thing is that the guidelines, because the IRA is based on tax credits, the guidelines are written by the IRS and the Treasury. The guidelines sometimes are very clear, sometimes are there are scale of grading, and you are a lawyer, so maybe you have a lot of people that ask for a tax opinion because nobody wants to invest into, again, a multi-million assets and rely upon tax credits, and then you realize that because the guidelines are not clear, your assets will not qualify to get tax credits. So that's why, for example, for solar, for wind, we have an history of tax credits. We know how to do it. We do together with tax equity investors. They also make a big portion of investment in the United States. But then, for example, for green hydrogen, it's totally new, and guidelines are not yet there. So in order to start investing and deploying money, we need to have those guidelines to be released as soon as possible.
So some of the investments of Zhero are in Europe, where you have a different regulatory system, different situation. So where do you see some of the key differences, or maybe some like things that are working better, less better, worse there? So, and how maybe United States could also learn from Europe for once.
It's funny because the European came first, so they already released their guidelines. So at least once in life, in Europe, they arrive first. The funny thing is that, and that's we go back to the policy and the interpretation. And I was reading the policy here and the policy in Europe. The policy in Europe right now, talking about green hydrogen, just take one as an example. So apparently, green hydrogen, the way they are putting in their guidelines in Europe, if the power used to produce green hydrogen has been subsidized, then the green hydrogen is not green. And so when you read this, and you say, okay, so if I do green hydrogen in the US, and the green hydrogen is the power used for that hydrogen has been subsidized through production tax credit or investment tax credits, then this green hydrogen, once landed in Europe, is not green anymore. So that's where we need clarification, because sometimes you have this mismatch between policies, even if the goal is clear. Europe has to import most of the green hydrogen and green products for their own purposes, but they need to talk each other in order that all those policies can talk each other and make sure that there is no loophole. And so investors, they know that once they invest into something that is green here, it's green everywhere.
Right, especially for something that's like hydrogen, right? That's like just needs the market. You need to build the market to make it really successful and lasting as long as we need. So I was wondering, Africa, because you also have investments there, if I recall correctly, it's South Africa, it's Middle East, and it's a different context, it's a different regulatory system, is, as you mentioned, like the previous conversation we had, it's the same technologies, but it's a different conditions, right? So where do you see some of the key differences, some key challenges in working in Africa? That's maybe my experience, because the work I do is mostly in developing countries, so I see completely different world and difficulty there. So from an investor, I think it's even worse.
Yeah, I can talk about my experience. I was in South Africa back in 2011 when South Africa was launching the renewable energy investment plan, and the way it was working was that there was one buyer, who was Eskom, the local utility in South Africa, and it was a reverse bid program. So you bid on a power tariff. And the buyer is ESCOM. ESCOM is bankable, yes and no. You have some government guarantees behind that. And that was the way they were investing in renewable energy. That's to say, this is an example to say that Africa is tough. Africa is tough because it's not bankable. Bankable is the main word in our word. Because if a project is not bankable, there is no way you can do it. So it's important that you have bankable buyers, guidelines and policy, we talked about that. And you don't want to have your assets be at risk because you are there with a multi-hundred millions dollars investment for 3 decades minimum. So it's important that when you invest in those areas, your investment are guaranteed in a way. Then there is a currency risks, there is a tax risk, fiscal risks. So those countries are not very stable. So the way we do it at Zhero is we invest in South Africa, Namibia, those areas to develop renewables and green molecules project to export to Europe. Why? And we also do that in North Africa and Middle East. Why? Because those are the areas in which there is the cheapest renewable energy sources. And having access to the cheapest renewable energy, you can translate into the cheapest green hydrogen product. And having a cheapest green hydrogen product means that you can replace the dirty hydrogen products that it's cheap by definition. And so if someone needs to choose, do I invest into gray hydrogen or to a green hydrogen, but once your green hydrogen is cheap, it's easy to invest into that products. So that's why it makes a lot of sense to invest in Africa, but with all the caveats that I said about the bankability and stability.
So I'm wondering, though, you go there, you make the most out of the great resources they have, because those are countries that have natural resources. I mean, the amount is huge, so the potential is great. But as also the country that needs the most in terms of economic growth. So, I mean, we have history, like also as European countries, of going there and then deploy everything we could and then leave. But I think part of the beauty of the energy transition is just, as we were saying. And in this country, this just takes a slightly different meaning, because you are really building. Here in the United States, you want to create new jobs, right? You want to make sure, as you were saying, people get a good wage, and it's like everyone there is equity and justice, but there is like really building the market and new opportunities. So how you are working with that?
There is also something like that in different countries in Africa. Again, in South Africa, for example, when I was there to qualify for the tender, you had to demonstrate that you had a portion of the equity, so ownership of the project, being black. So they have, after, when Mandela, or Madiba, how they call him, became president, the first goal was exactly that, to have everyone doing business in South Africa having at least a percentage of black equity into the deal. This was the most powerful law to make sure that the black people had the opportunity to be back as fast as possible into the business and have try to legalize the inequality that was back then. And this is the Black Road Empowerment Law that was done back then. The second was that into this tender that was very competitive, you got more points, you score more points and have more likelihood to win if you give some portion of equity for free to local trust. So for example, my project was in the Kalahari Desert, close to a very small village. And we gave 2% of the equity we call free carry, so it's equity for free, to the village. So the village became like a trust, like a local trust, and we gave 2% forever into this project. This project was like $400 million project, so 2% was a meaningful amount of money for a small village. And the third was to pay taxes, local taxes, because our assets are assets that pay property tax. And so the way we were doing that was, of course, to pay taxes locally and try to help the local community to reinvest those taxes into something that the people can have a tangible benefit on. So all those things that are at state level but at local level can help a lot of those communities to go back on track. And people has new jobs, they learn new jobs, they have more money. A lot of those communities have women that never worked. After we made this investment and we invest into some of this women entrepreneurship, those women were back working. And that was, I was very proud of my South African experience.
You should. I mean, you should, because I think those are tough countries, as you were saying, to work with, because it's, I mean, you know, those are countries that had like such a tiny impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So they're really just suffering, but they're still doing their part in the transition. So they also have decarbonization plan by 2050. They made all the commitments like US did, like Europe did. So they're doing their part, but the reality they need much more. They need economic development that is sustainable. So I think that's definitely the right way to do it.
Yeah, this is another thing that I like about energy transition. I think, and I call energy revolution. I don't call it as an energy transition. So this energy revolution would be a lot of people that were left behind, that were in, you know, you mentioned Africa. We can talk about many other countries in the world. They can now participate into this energy revolution. The beauty of renewable energy is that it's everywhere, and it's the most democratic source of energy. Everybody has sun, wind, water, whatever. So they just need to participate into something that is here and now. That's why a lot of multilateral agencies, IMF, they are talking about climate funding. They need money. They need money and they need policy to make all those projects available for as much people as possible. And this will really create jobs, create very well paid people. People stop to migrate and put pressure on the border because they have jobs in-house, but they don't need to go anywhere. So this is the most important thing that we have to do in the next decades or so.
Yeah, and with that on the other side of the equation, because you know when we talk about climate change, one side you want to mitigate emissions, right? And so this kind of job, that's what they do. You change your energy sources and you reduce emissions. On the other side, you need to help this country to adapt to climate change because they don't have the infrastructure. They use crops that are subject to drought, and then the economy totally collapses. 70% of the income is just based on that. So there is so much that could be done there. Let me check the time. I think we have time also to ask you about a bit some projects. I always love to hear stories, right? Some concrete stories, some fun stuff. I don't know. I think it's always most tangible, right?
Yeah, no, about project, of course, we touched a little bit about South Africa. So right now at Zhero, we are working a lot in the US and in the Gulf Coast, so Texas, Louisiana, because that's where most of the energy sources are, but also where there are a lot of potentially hydrogen, what we call hydrogen hub. So in the future, we're gonna have big hydrogen hub. So hydrogen hub are where we have the combination of renewable energy, hydrogen off-takers, hydrogen producer, pipelines. We need to invest a lot in pipelines. We need to invest a lot of transmission lines. This is another big area in which we are very focused on. So of course we We need electrons, we need molecules, but also we need the highways to connect those electrons and molecules with someone that want to buy it. So the Gulf Coast will be for sure an area in which we are going to invest a lot, and we are now scouting for specific areas in which we are going to invest first. Then we move into other areas of the United States. And that's why we are
Don't
also
tell us
doing-
all the business plan, you know?
No, some
You
of
don't
those
know
are-
who is here.
Some of those areas are still under deep scrutiny. But then of course it's North Africa. As I said, North Africa is a perfect set for renewable energy, and we can invest also in those transmission lines, or we call e-interconnectors, so electrical interconnectors that connect North Africa to Europe. And then of course the Sub-Saharan Africa. This is an amazing area in which you have such phenomenal wind sources, very, very cheap, and it's make a lot of sense to produce green hydrogen down there, and then do green ammonia and other products for our off-takers. We also have customers, so and that's what we are right now, what we are doing as a company. We are also looking to invest into battery storage. We didn't touch today, maybe we can do another session in the future about
But I
that.
think just give them like quick.
Yeah.
Because battery is key. Storage is key.
So
for renewable.
why battery storage is important is because coming from a strong renewable energy background, I've been challenged many times. Hey, Andrea, yes, you talk about solar and wind, but this is intermittent source of energy. Yes, but guess what? We have a solution. So now we have battery storage. We have battery storage that can store the energy and release the energy when the grid needs. But I want to push this a little bit more further. And this is not something that Zhero is, we are investing in traditional battery storage, utility scale. But the way we see the future is also, we are all familiar with all the electric cars. So the more electric cars will be around and penetrate into the system, the more access to a phenomenal amount of battery storage we have in the future, creating the largest spread of battery storage that a human can possibly think. So when we drive to Dulles and we see all those thousands of cars now in the parking lots, try to think about 10 years from now, where we have thousands of cars doing nothing, and then the grid all of a sudden need power, where I can take that power from those cars. This is the vehicle to grid technology that is coming, and it's going to be another addition to the energy transition that we are talking about. And we can get rid of all the coal power plants or fossil fuels. We don't need that anymore.
I'm not sure if we were, never get there, like 100% zero coal, or maybe coal, yes, but oil and gas, that would be tough, really tough. But, as long as we can produce, we can capture CO2 from the atmosphere at the same time, and we have more forest, and forest sequester CO2, so you have a balance, a trade-off between the two, emitting and what gets sequestrated. We can get to net, we have to get to net zero. There is no solution, again, for our kids especially, so it's definitely.
Yeah, we are getting there. The real question is when. Because in all this discussion that we had today, timing is not an invariable thing. So we don't have a lot of time to do that, to reverse this. So that's why timing is important as well. So we need massive amount of money to invest into these new technologies. We need policy to be as much clear as possible. And then yes, the train left the station. So we need just to accelerate that path.
So one project already implemented, one, two, whatever you want to share, already implemented. And you shared with me about Cornell University. I think it would be nice here
Yeah,
because we are in a university.
Of course, so as Zhero, I told you, because Zhero is a new company. We born a year ago, so we are still into origination and development mood. Project that I realized, so those are tangible. So when I arrived in the US leading this company, I met Cornell. And Cornell, more than a decade ago, I think 2012, they started this decarbonization plan. And they said, because college is, you cannot invest a lot into rooftop solar. You know, Cornell has a huge amount of energy they need to run the campus and to run all their activities. So when I asked them, do you guys have land? They say, yeah, we have plenty of land here in Ithaca and in the area around. And so we lease those land, and then we start building a large solar plant. And by the way, this was an initial investment from my previous company. We were able to offset 10% of the CO2 of Cornell. But then the other day, actually, I went back to their website, and they just announced that they reached 90% of the CO2 totally offset by Cornell, continuing to invest in solar, big solar plant, ground mounted. So Cornell was one example. The other big example that I have that I'm very proud of, I met the mayor of Annapolis, the city of Annapolis, 5 years ago. And he said, Andrea, we have this landfill that is a huge liability for us. What we can do? And I said, okay, you can do a solar plant on top of the landfill and move from a huge liability into a big revenue stream for the city. And that's what we did. So we built solar plants on top of the landfill owned by the city of Annapolis. The city is also the buyer of the electricity coming from the solar plants, reducing their bill, and also receiving a lease for 30 years, plus taxes paid by the solar plants. So they totally reshuffle their position from a huge liability to huge revenue stream coming from solar. So those are just examples of how big and how material are renewable energy that can provide benefit for communities that stand for decades.
So I'm checking the time. Shall we open up the floor for questions? Because I could keep going.
Oh, me too.
So, yeah, I mean, we were just chatting before. It was supposed to be like half an hour, just like quick chat. Almost an hour, we were still talking. So any question for Andrea? No question small or big. Again, you know, don't feel like you're not an expert, and so don't be shy. We are really here just to answer any question you may have, or curiosity.
Yeah, I have a question.
Gerardo?
Thank you very much. A question on things you mentioned. I know a bit of Zhero company and what you've done. I was thinking how much in the whole structure of the investment, how much important is the storage, the stockage, the transportation, rather than the investment itself, and how much is requiring support or investment in itself, the production only, or the storage and the transportation of the energy or the hydrogen itself?
No, that's a good question. It's so let's start from electrons first, and then we go to the molecules, to the hydrogen. So for the electrons, the big bottleneck is the transmission lines. So we realized that, and we realized that to solve this bottleneck, we need to invest more and more in transmission lines, not only to generate wind power, but also find a way to move those electrons where the load is. So talking about US, you have what they call called green belt. Green belt is where the wind blows from Canada down to Texas. So there is a fantastic generation in that area, but you cannot move those electrons where the loads pockets are, east and west. So you have to build transmission lines. There is programs by the DOE to identify those transmission corridors and make sure that investments are going into those areas. Plus, the FERC, the federal agency, they are going to be the backstop for permitting. That's to avoid problems when you get. We need to have rights of way to develop transmission lines, long-term transmission lines. And if you deal with all the local community, you will never get there. So the federal agency will backstop when projects are of national interest. That's for the electrons. For the molecules, it's even more complex. Why? Because hydrogen, if someone has some recollection about chemistry, hydrogen is the smallest atom in the Mendeleev chart, right? What does it mean? It means that it's tough to move because it's very small, goes everywhere. In fact, in the United States, there is only a couple of pipelines. And so we need to invest in more pipelines to move hydrogen or hydrogen-related products. While we have plenty of pipelines to move CH4, methane, we don't have for hydrogen. So we need more, and we need to invest more in those pipelines. Do we have policy to do so? No, not yet. Who's going to regulate pipelines for hydrogen? Nobody knows. Maybe FERC, maybe someone else. So there is still a lot of things to do to make it happen. Then you can liquefy hydrogen and move as a liquid. Fantastic. But to liquefy hydrogen, you have to reach almost the 0 Kelvin with an enormous amount of energy to liquefy it. That's why, for example, for hydrogen, for us it's better to be a green ammonia products, because once you combine the hydrogen with nitrogen, then the temperature to liquefy it is far more reasonable and cheaper. And so that could be a solution. You can put into an ammonia product. The ammonia will serve as a carrier, and then you can crack it back as an hydrogen to work as a hydrogen, or just having as an ammonia if you want to do fertilizer. So all those things are in evolution, and all those things are of interest for Zhero in terms of investment. That's why we call interconnector part of the business that we do. And then the last part of your question was the storage. The storage is an important part as well. Unfortunately, hydrogen can be stored only in salt cavern, and there are not a lot of salt cavern in the US. So we have it. That is one of the way we originate projects. So in layers in which we, first of all, we see where the land is available, where the pipelines are, then where the salt caverns are, so we can store the molecules, the hydrogen, whatever products, and then use the caverns to modulate the production to the off-takers. For the electrons, the storage is battery storage that we briefly touched before. But it's a very complex, now you realize it's a very complex development activities, from the generation to the storage, to the transport, and then to finally to reach the off-taker, to decarbonize whatever is the business of the off-taker.
Well, as you were saying, we don't have transmission lines adequate enough to deal with all this, or this new renewable energy, this new clean energy coming into the grid. So that's a problem across the border. I would say it's not only the United States.
Oh yeah. Europe just released the other day the fact that they have very old transmission lines, and they have to replace that or to improve that with new investment. If I have to say, one thing that we missed in the Inflation Reduction Act was to incentivize the building of new transmission lines. This is the only thing that was not there.
Well, I hope they will find a way to do that. There's so much money
Yeah.
in Inflation Reduction Act, going also directly to the states, so that they can then decide how to use it. So hopefully we'll get there. I can't recall who also had a question before. Oh, yeah.
Hi, thanks for coming in today to talk about this subject. I was wondering if you could speak to the potential downsides of using hydrogen and, negative effects associated with it within, transportation or its use, anything along those lines.
I'm trying to think that, yeah. So, back to what I said before, because it's a very small molecule, it's tough to move unless the technology there is a particular technology to move those molecules. So pipeline, for example, there's been a lot of discussion to use and blend it with methane. So where you can put the hydrogen in the same pipeline. Unfortunately, the pipeline that we have are not built for hydrogen. So you can blend a portion, a percentage of mixing hydrogen with methane, but you cannot just simply put hydrogen into other pipelines. Otherwise, you have big problems in terms of safety. Releasing hydrogen, because it's very small again, you have to make sure that you don't release this into the atmosphere. I think I'm not an expert, but I think hydrogen, once the hydrogen goes to the stratosphere, then we can have also some effect. I don't know. I don't know if it's a positive or negative effect, but I think there are studies right now on those things. So that's why for hydrogen we are at the beginning of a long path where we have also to understand all those things and make sure that we are moving into this transition in a safer way and as well as in a clean way.
Yeah, I think one of the main gaps from a regulatory standpoint, policy standpoint, is the lack of standards to ensure like environmental safety. And so because, those are the main risks on this kind of new technology. So in addition to what the investor needs in terms of certainty, as Andrea was saying, there are communities around that needs to be safe. So standards are still missing, or they are not standard everywhere. So this is still like one of the area that needs additional work. I think Fernanda had some questions, right?
Yeah, a quick question, maybe personal. When Andrea, this was really exceptional. Thank you. And I had a personal question about the 2007 transition. How you move from the big oil and energy to the green energy. And I'm wondering why 2007. I was thinking as a Europeanist, we're opening up. Europe becomes now a big continent of the European Union, includes all the Central European countries. It's 2007, right before the financial crisis. We have green energy that is becoming more mainstream, both because, before there was Greenpeace, they were protesting against global trade in Seattle, but there was not the sense that there was this urgency. So I'm wondering what happened in the context, what happened to you personally in 2007 for doing this transition. Maybe it was just a better job or something. Or I have this funny story from the founder of Impossible Meats and Burgers, who was a lobbyist in Washington for green energy, and then every time he was taking the lobbyist out for dinner, he was eating steak. And he was like, well, we just lobbied for this issue, but then we're at stake. So, and that came kind of his moment of of transition. So I was wondering what made you do this transition.
So first of all, I was not thinking about renewable energy at all. I received this call from like a recruiter in London, and she was explaining to me this company that is SunPower. SunPower is one of the leading solar company in the world. It's an American company that now is owned by Total. So at the end of the day, they are owned by an oil and gas company. Anyway, or energy company, how they call now. So I received a call from this recruiter, and they were explaining about solar, the renewable energy, and all those things. They say, guys, I think you have the wrong number in your contact list, because I'm an oil and gas guy. So I don't know nothing about renewable energy, I don't know nothing about solar. I say, no, you have to do it, you have to do it. And then I met the management of this company, and I was fascinated by the passion of the management. I say, wow. And so I was driven by the passion of the management of this company, even if it was like already a multi-billion dollars company, stock listed, but all the top management were very, very strong believer of the energy transition. The founder of SunPower, was a student at Stanford in the 70s. He told me, because I asked him how you ended up with the idea of a solar panel back then. He said, because I was in the queue on a gas station during the strike, and the oil crisis that was in the 70s. And so I rushed to Stanford, to my professor, and say what we can do to solve the problem. And then he showed me the studies about the photovoltaic, the solar photovoltaic, and that's how he made his company. And I was fascinated. I said, okay, I'm in. And then in 2007, the Decreto Bersani happened in Italy with the feed-in tariff, and so the market was like blossoming all of a sudden, despite the crisis that happened the year after when Lehman Brothers went belly up. But I was so happy to work in this environment that I didn't care about bank crisis, and I just embraced the change. Similar to that happened last year when I received a call from Zhero, from Marco Gra. He's a true believer about hydrogen, about clean hydrogen, and the way we are going to change our world is power.
Another question?
Maybe we'll take
Please,
that
of
one
course.
first. Sure.
Andrea, thank you for sharing your perspective today, especially as it relates to the technology, the policy, and also the business side of things. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. In the aerospace sector, as you know, is a sector we're looking forward to, hydrogen-powered aircraft one day, especially the larger ones, because volume and temperature and other things that demand for larger aircraft to have this kind of technology, which is very exciting. But that's probably out, 10 or 15 years out. My question has to do with the hydrogen technology in terms of adoption and scaling that you mentioned earlier. So as you look, let's say, over the next 10 years, are there other sectors that you think will be able to adopt the technology earlier? Because I think as an aerospace sector, it'd be good for us to look at other sectors that maybe can achieve some successes, and there will be lessons learned along the way that maybe we can benefit from. So what sectors do you think will be able to adopt hydrogen technology earlier than others?
Yeah, thank you, Roberto. Yeah, this is a very good question, because this is what we discuss internally every day. So there are low-hanging fruits where we can adopt clean hydrogen very, very soon. It's a matter of how competitive you can do it, and I'm referring to green ammonia. So green ammonia, right now, so let's say gray ammonia, the cost of gray ammonia is between $300 and $400 per ton. That's how they do it right now, with all the emissions relation and stuff like that. To do an ammonia at that level, of course, we need to really be very competitive. And probably in the US, we are not yet there because gas is cheap, still very cheap. Different story in Europe, where the gas is not as cheap as here. The cost of gas in Europe is probably 3 times what you pay here. So a green ammonia here exporting into Europe can be competitive. Talking about low-hanging fruits. So maybe agriculture can be easy, not easy, can be decarbonized easier than other sectors. I totally agree with you that probably for other industries we are not yet there. We need to probably work on the scale of hydrogen production in other sectors. That's why it's important that we have the hydrogen hub as soon as possible. So the DOE is investing a lot of money into that. They will release very soon which hydrogen hub will be, they are going to invest first. There are a few of those where we are also participating in. There is Houston High Velocity Hydrogen Hub and hydrogen hub around Corpus Christi, California with Arches. So those hydrogen hubs will help to build the scale, get hydrogen costs down, get also the incentives from Inflation Reduction Act, and then finally we can work on some other application like audio. So everybody knows that airplanes need to be decarbonized, and electricity is not, you cannot do that with like we do with the EV cars. So we need to work on something, e-fuel that are going to be there for that decarbonization. But before this application, we need to do other applications that are more like low-hanging fruits, like also the oil and gas industries. Those are first target.
Next question was a bit more financial, let's say. Where do you guys raise the money from? Private companies, investors in the public space, private equity, venture capital, you name it. And what's the kind of required rate of return on the equity that they invest that they require? And what's eventually the premium, considering the technology risk and the risk that you're mentioning about policies? So you never know, what's going to happen next or how much certainty they have. And what's the time span that they're looking at to return their equity? That's a specific question, but anyway.
May I follow up on this?
Sure.
Because I work in the financial sector. What makes a project bankable?
Yeah. So first of all, where the money come from? When you start up a company, of course, we did a fundraising last year, and we raised the first money for development. This is very expensive money, as you can imagine. So returns on this money is private equity returns. So double-digit, maybe high double-digit returns. But of course, the more you develop a project, the more you raise money with lower returns because you're de-risking project. Okay, so the first money that this money is very expensive, so you want to put this money into very risky projects because high risk, high returns. Then you move into the development line, and then once a project reaches the bankability, so it's we call ready to build or notice to proceed, to use a terminology in the EPC work. That project is fully bankable because you have all the permits to build and operate the project. But above all, and you work in the power purchase agreement arena, you have an off-taker. So once you have an off-taker, a buyer of electricity, for molecules is a little bit more complex right now because there is no liquid market, while in the electrons area, there are markets that is pretty deregulated, so you can have off-taker there. The bankability of the project is because you have someone that buys something once built for the next 2 decades at a fixed price or price plus escalation. So that made the deal. And of course, once you raise the money to build, that is not the money that you raise for development, that money will have a returns on a single digit, because at that point you have an infrastructure kind of business. So though the fundraising goes along the way with the development, construction, and operation of an asset.
So, but just because I'm also wondering, because for us it's easy to understand that you build, but you are not sending, I mean, you are not the one transmitting, distributing the electricity you produce. You need an off-taker, what you call off-taker. So you need an utility, someone that buys the
Utility, corporate, someone is investing in decarbonizing their
that
business.
buys what they produce.
We mentioned Cornell before, so the deal with Cornell was not, we were the owner of the assets, okay? So we developed the project, we paid lease on the land to Cornell, because Cornell remained the landlord. But with Cornell, we had an agreement to buy that energy coming from that solar farm for the next 2 decades at a certain price under specific conditions. We were not, of course, transmitting the physical electrons to Cornell, because the power purchase agreement, you can make the power purchase agreement in a different way. It can be physical, so buyer and seller are in the same area, or it can be virtual. So it can be also a financial hedge. So there are different ways to sell those kind of products. You don't need to be in the same location. And that's also what is helping the transition. We talk about the renewable energy, the policy, the incentives, but also the products on how we sell stuff is helping the transition, because you don't need to be anymore in the same area where the buyer and the seller are in the same market. It can be also physically, remotely located.
And then when you have more than one off-takers, you create competition on the other side, so they get better price at the end of the day.
On the green hydrogen side, when I mentioned before we are waiting for the guidelines, one of the uncertainties is where I can sell this hydrogen. Should I stay in the same area? Can be in a virtual offtake, or where I can buy the power to do my hydrogen molecule, the green hydrogen. Can I buy the power in the same area, need to be co-located, or I can have an hydrogen production in Louisiana and buy renewable energy credits or green electrons in Montana, I don't know.
That's
And
why
then offset my production. So those are the questions that we have right now, waiting for the guidelines.
that's going back to your point of what is bankable. That's why it's very difficult to make this bankable in developing countries, because they don't give them the certainty someone is buying it, and at certain price for 20 years or 30 years.
Not sure how we are with time.
We should close.
Yes.
Or maybe just any last question? Just want to make sure everyone got. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to the speakers, thank you to the hosts, Professor Nicola, Professor Cavacetti, thank you all of you for being there. Next appointments are piano concerts, piano for hands, so one October 10th in collaboration collaboration with Georgetown University and Istituto Italiano di Cultura about the Divine Comedy of Dante Alighieri, and one October 13th in collaboration with Le Dive, donne italiane che vivono all'estero, for the concert Women's Music Talks About Women. Last but not least, on October 18th, our annual fundraising event, our gala at the Embassy of Italy. So consider coming. The theme is Green Obsession. So this year we'll talk about sustainability in every field. So in particular in architecture, for the gala, we'll have Stefano Boeri, the architect of Vertical Forest, coming in Washington, D.C. as honorary guest. Thank you all. There is a reception outside.
Thank you.